Hello everyone, and welcome back to this week's video of the continuing series of the Warriors of Darkness. We are using this series to discuss the Warriors of Darkness, just who they are and what led them down the path that brought them here to be remembered as the villains of the world of Final Fantasy XIV. So this is part 3 of my series, so if you want to see part 1 and part 2, which explains the Warriors of Darkness's journey, as well as Lamette's story, and I personally recommend that you do, you can find the link down below in the description, but also at the end of this video. So this week, we'll be looking more upon the Knight of Darkness, or as one of the tanks of the group, Branden. And so, I will be calling this video, The Dutiful Knight. Now, the Knight of Darkness was once a member of the Warriors of Darkness, though he was originally known as a Warrior of Light of the First. While he was journeying on the Source, he went under the alias of Blandherz, in an effort to blend in with this strange new world. After his death and eventual resurrection as one of the cardinal virtues, though, he was given the name of Daikaiose, which in ancient Greek was the personified spirit of righteousness and justice. But his friends knew him simply under the name of Branden. Now, Branden is identical to the male Rogadin from the original Around Reborn promotional trailer and is usually seen in the same armor as a paladin, though it was dyed black after arriving in the Source, signifying his choice to become a warrior of darkness. After being reborn as Daikaiose, however, while his overall appearance is the same, like with the other virtues, his eyes had changed to black and red and his skin took on this plaster-like white of a sin-eater while surrounded by this ghastly glow, having lost himself to all but his most basic of instincts. When he was alive before, however, he was seen as a good-spirited person who liked to sit back and take it easy while laughing with his friends, as well as having a fondness for fine wines. In fact, it was suggested that he had a bad habit of going through their coin while on the road because he couldn't resist indulging, oftentimes getting told off by Lamette for this. He also seemed to have a bit of a playful side because he apparently had a habit of poking fun at Ardbert behind his back with Nailbert when he thought that no one was listening. At the very core, Branden was a knight and thus held true to the idea of honor and duty, putting the needs of others before his own. He held true to his oaths despite eventually being stripped of his rank and having been disgraced, but despite all of that, he never once forgot his knightly vows and held true to them even after the end. Branden was born in the nation of Berbert and had joined as a relatively young recruit to the city's knights before he was caught by the eye of Princess Sadia. Around this time, a mysterious plague was sweeping across the city, somehow turning innocent people into horrible beasts, and no one knew what was doing it or how it was possible. They referred to this as a magical plague because it didn't seem to be natural. Princess Sadia had embarked upon her own investigation to try and figure out who was causing this, and she chose Branden to serve as her protector for his chivalrous and kind nature. During this time, the two of them grew very close, and it was even suggested that Branden had special feelings for the princess, while she, in turn, thought very highly of him. Branden served as her bodyguard faithfully for some time, but eventually, during one of these investigations, he failed to keep her safe and she was injured. Though she made a full recovery, Branden's failure was enough for him to be stripped of his knighthood and was cast out. Branden eventually left Berbert behind, though it was shown that he never forgot about the princess, nor of the plight that was attacking his home. However, he seemed to realize that he wasn't yet strong enough to be able to do much but watch from the sidelines. He seemed to have chosen to leave his homeland behind of his own free will and decide to grow stronger so that when he next returned, he would be able to help solve this problem once and for all. It is unknown for how long he traveled on his own, but during these travels he eventually met up with Ardbert and Lamette, joining their group around the same time as Renda-Rae. Apparently, he had seen a lot of potential in Ardbert and seems to have taken on the role of a sort of mentor-like figure for the younger man. They grew close during their adventures and had no problems in sharing tales with his new companions. He also welcomed both Nailbert and Silva when they joined them, and he came to enjoy his new life with them as they continued to grow stronger together, and he fought twice as hard to protect his friends. But it was still obvious that Verbert's plight always weighed heavily upon his mind. After their group grew in fame and recognition, they returned to Verbert to help solve the plague, which had grown during Branden's absence. Branden returned to the same home that had once banished him, but this time he was determined to bring justice to the culprit behind these grotesque transformations. When he returned, he was joyfully reunited with the princess, and it seemed that their relationship picked up where it left off as they began their investigation. Ultimately, they discovered that the culprit behind Werlyt's misery was the court mage and seemingly loyal servant to the royal family, a man named Taldric. After confronted him, the mage confessed, showing that he had let his pride and jealousy take over under the belief that he was the only one who should sit upon the throne. Using the knowledge he learned from Werlyt, who was unknowingly aiding him in starting the plague, he declared his plan was to throw the kingdom into such chaos that he would be able to claim the throne for himself, a plan that may very well have worked had they not uncovered the truth. Branden and the others battled him, and even though they won, Taldric cursed Princess Sadia with his final breath, like he had harmed so many others before, and the princess was transformed into a monster right then and there. Before she lost her will completely, she turned to Branden and begged that he slay her there and set her free. Branden hesitated, but in the end he gave in to his princess's wish and cut her down before she was completely lost to madness. Because of his sacrifice, he was gifted a crystal of light and came to understand the true meaning of justice, though this was a heavy blow to himself, and it had cut him so deeply that it seems that he never fully recovered from the death of his beloved princess. But it seems that the matter wasn't finished completely, for it turns out that while Taldric was responsible for the plague, he was merely a puppet being controlled by another, the Shadowkeeper. Branden continued to accompany his friends on his new mission to avenge the princess and all those other poor souls who were cursed because of the Shadowkeeper. But sadly, the truth came out that it was their very own Silva, who was none other than the Shadowkeeper and an ally to the Ascians. They fought and defeated her, but Oddbird, who was still cared about their friend despite everything, spared her life, unable to bring himself to finish her off. It seemed that Branden agreed with this choice as well, as the 5 remaining members of their group set out to deliver justice to the Ascians Midron and Lodrith while they still had the chance. However, the Ascians' deaths didn't solve anything. Instead, their actions accidentally triggered the flood when light was pushed to such a great point in this world and the balance was disrupted. After realizing what they had done, he agreed to join forces with Elidibus and travel to the source to bring about a rejoining and spare their world from becoming a light-filled void. After seeing the kind of empty monsters that his people had become during the plague, he seemed to believe that death was preferable. He willingly allowed himself to be killed since the travel to the source meant giving up their physical forms, and thus his life. He trusted Oddbird enough to put an end to his life and was given passage to the source where their task would be to spur the Beastmen tribes into growing desperation and have them summon ever more powerful gods. To that end, he became one of the Warriors of Darkness, and even took the new name of Lancier to help blend in with this world. Eventually, though, their fight with the Warrior of Light of the Source and the other Scions came to a head when Urianger pit them against each other in order to gain their crystals and thus a meeting with Minfilia. Recognizing this as a better alternative than bringing about another calamity, Branden supported this decision and returned to the First with Minfilia and the others. Just as the flood was about to swallow Norvrandt, the Warriors of Darkness, minus Oddbird, sacrificed what strength they had left and were able to stop the flood from taking what was left of Norvrandt. Sadly, the years had not been kind to Werlyt, having eventually fallen to Sin Eaters and later becoming home to the Fae folk. Most of the people who survived the city fled to whatever lands were left. Most of them seemed to have headed to Lakeland in the safety of the Crystal Tower. Branden should have been laid to rest after his final sacrifice. However, decades later, Branden's body was discovered and turned into a Sin Eater through Volfrey's powers and became one of the cardinal virtues named Daikaioze. Unlike with Lamet, he had caused some serious damage, the most noticeable in the village of Wright on Kalusha. It seemed that until that point, though, Daikaioze was hardly ever seen. But then some treasure hunters went to Werlyt, now having been transformed into Ilmeg, in search of treasures in the ruins. Unfortunately for them, they happened upon 2 of the 3 treasures of the royal family that had been left behind and stole them. This caused Daikaioze, who by some base instinct was still fiercely loyal to Princess Sadia, and sought them out to retake the treasures. Daikaioze attacked without mercy as he recovered the stolen treasures, causing any who cut down to become Sin Eaters in their place. When the Warrior of Light of the Source arrived in Norvrandt, they joined up with Grandson, who had made it his mission to hunt down Daikaioze to avenge his beloved. See, his fiancée Melinda had been in Wright the day that Daikaioze attacked, and even had one of the 2 stolen treasures in her possession. Now, she wasn't one of the treasure hunters. She was merely a victim in all this, as she was simply asked to restore and repair the treasure before Daikaioze appeared. He arrived in the village and attacked everyone who got in his way before finding the treasure, killing her in the process and sealed her fate as a Sin Eater. When grandson arrived, he was too late to save her and was begged by the Sin Eater version of Melinda to cut her down, much like how Princess Sadia begged Branden nearly a century before them, which he did so in the end. Grandson was determined to kill him in revenge, and their search led them across the land as they hunted for the treasures and therefore him. After Dekayose recovered the second stolen treasure, their hunt took them to Ilmed, where they met So'ul, who was an old friend of Branden's and the princess. He revealed the whole story of the plague, as well as Branden's past and Princess Sadia's fate. Now aware of the whole story, grandson found himself unable to bring himself to fully hate Branden anymore, whom he now sees as also a victim in all this as well. He made his peace with Branden and decided that he will still make it his goal to slay Branden, but it is rather more to help him find peace, along with letting Melinda's spirit rest, rather than with pure revenge. Seeing this change in him, So'ul revealed to us the location of the final treasure, and they go off to retrieve it as Daikayose appeared, like they hoped. After a long battle, Daikayose lay there defeated, finally being released from his duty. As his body dissolves into light though, what is left behind is his broken and empty crystal of light, though perhaps not completely empty. Inside it, his memory appeared before them on the few motes of ether that still resonated within, and they hear what was in his heart once more. Though this being was merely a shade of the man he once was, he spoke out, revealing that he would never forget the love he held for Princess Sadia, and that he was finally at peace, now that he knew the difference between being a mindless weapon and the true act of justice. He wasn't the only one either, for grandson stated that he also found a measure of relief from helping to set Branden free, and he's now able to move on with his life. He and the Warrior of Lights leave the treasures with So'ul, who promises to place them somewhere where they'll never be disturbed again, before thanking them for their kindness. Grandson sticks around just long enough to thank the Warrior of Darkness for sticking with them for so long, and he sets off down the road, hopefully to a much happier future. As for Branden, his story largely ends there, though after the defeat of Emixelk, it is shown that he's still with the spirits of his comrades as they reunite with Otbert's spirit, welcoming back their leader once more. Though Verbert is now gone, the memories of the princess and her knight will live on with the truth now made known, and hopefully Branden will finally be rewarded for his years of faithful service in the next life. This one is just like one from a fairy tale where we have a brave knight who is 100% devoted to serving the fair princess, but sadly there is no happily ever after for Branden. Yet despite all that, one thing is for certain. Branden was a knight, brave and true, much like another knight that we remembered who sacrificed his life for those he cared about. Alright everyone, thank you all so much for watching. This was part 3 of my Warriors of Darkness videos, and I'm really pleased with how well they're turning out so far. Now, we have covered both Lamit and Branden, and we still have the stories of the DPS waiting in the wings, both Nailbert and Renda-Rae. Again, I will be keeping both Oddbert and Silva on hold until after 5.3, but I do hope that you will be looking forward to next week on part 4 of our story. So if you have a request on who you would like to see next, please let me know down below and what you thought of this video. So until next time everyone, this is Fantasy Girl signing out.